The Honourable Member Phil Twyford.
Mr Speaker, we oppose this bill because of its effect. It will weaken and undermine local government. We oppose it because it's based on a lie, Nick Smith's fiction that somehow councils are out of control and doing things that are racking up all sorts of debt. And we oppose it, sir, because it is a textbook study in how not to legislate, rushed through without evidence and without proper consultation. Mr Speaker, the National Party is a stranger to the principle of do no harm, and I wonder whether one of the doctors in the National Party caucus should run a little workshop for them about the Hippocratic Oath. Principle number 1, do no harm. Because this bill, Mr Speaker, will do harm to local communities and it will do harm to the institution of local government. And the first big harm that this bill will do is that by replacing the 4 well-beings with a narrowed purpose statement that talks about providing good quality infrastructure, local public services and regulatory functions at least cost, it will limit the ability of councils to meet the needs of their communities. And that we've heard some speculation from the likes of Jackie Dean and others during the stages of this debate that these words will have no effect, that they can stretch to accommodate anything that councils want to do. But we have little doubt, sir, that the effect of this provision will be chilling on the activities of local government. Every council has to choose between competing priorities. All of them, none of them, are so flush with money that they can do everything they want to do. And the threat of legal action by the Chamber of Commerce or some vexatious ratepayer will be enough to deter councils from undertaking activities that don't tightly fit the new definition. This bill tilts the playing field in favour of a narrow 1950s vision of roads, rates and rubbish for local government. Action on affordable housing, the Pacifica, Diwali and Lantern festivals, economic leadership by councils desperately trying to cling on to services and jobs in their community. This bill puts a question mark over all of those things. Last parliamentary term, Mr Speaker, Rodney Hyde tried and failed to impose a definition of core services on local government. And he gave up because one mayor after another beat a path to his door and persuaded him it was an illogical nonsense to impose a straitjacket, a one-size-fits-all policy on every council in New Zealand. Rodney Hyde rubbished councils who were working on educational achievement in their communities, and then he visited the Educational Trust Comet in South Auckland, and he was so wowed by their work he changed his mind. That was all it took. But I'm sorry to say that Nick Smith, who is the real architect of this abomination of a bill, does not have even the intellectual honesty of Rodney Hyde. And the national members in this House, even though many of them represent rural and provincial communities, either don't care or they've turned a blind ear, a deaf ear, to the pleas from local councils that it is precisely rural and provincial communities who need the flexibility of the 4 well-beings to respond to the needs of their communities. Small and isolated communities don't have big local economies. They don't have a multitude of public services and private providers who can step in when the market doesn't deliver. And the battle to hold on to services, sir, in local communities is a fight for survival. And often local councils are the last line of defence, whether it's running a medical clinic in Rakaya, a banking outlet in Bluff, or supporting a community festival that attracts visitors into that town. All over this country, sir, councils are supporting their communities, promoting economic development and looking after their people. Someone has to do it because this national government as sure as hell isn't. The second big harm of this bill, sir, is the bill's confiscation of the rights of New Zealand citizens to vote in a binding referendum on a reorganisation proposal of their local council. That's right. Under the law currently, every citizen has the right to vote in a binding referendum if there is a proposal to disestablish or amalgamate their council. Under this bill, that right is gone. And if you don't want to be part of some super council If you don't want your community to be swallowed up by some larger local government entity where your community will have less say and less voice, then the only way you can get a vote, sir, is by getting 10% of the citizens in that area, that total area, to sign a petition. And that is a very big ask. Now, whether you think the current law is working or not, and I think most people would agree that the current legislation is far from perfect, it makes it too difficult to get an amalgamation. I put it to this House that this bill creates a much worse problem. It disempowers citizens by taking away their vote. And is that something, Mr. Speaker, that the national members in this House don't care about? Is it just that the democratic principles are not important to them? It gives the power, it takes the power from citizens and gives it to unelected bureaucrats in the Local Government Commission. It is just one more step, sir, in this national government's unfortunate treatment of local government. The National Party doesn't give a damn about local democracy. It's not even a nice to have, it's more a case of who gives a toss. When democracy gets in the way of your dairy farming mates in Canterbury getting their free water consents, down comes the axe on the elected members of Environment Canterbury. And then they didn't trust the people of Auckland to vote for the super city, so what did they do? They legislated to take away the right of Aucklanders to vote on the super city, and then they handed over 75% of the new Auckland to hand-picked corporate boards. Well, you can only conclude, Mr. Speaker, that the National Party doesn't trust the people. It prefers to have our communities and their assets managed by faceless bureaucrats, commissioners, the great and the good, and their shoulder-tapped mates. This, Mr. Speaker, is a broken promise by John Key. He said very clearly before the last election that there would be no forced amalgamations under his government. He said it again when these proposals were released. And this is the most cynical thing about this bill. National members can say, we're not forcibly amalgamating anybody, our hands are clean. But this bill creates the very mechanism that allows for communities to be forcibly amalgamated, Mr. Smith. The Chamber of Commerce or anyone can present a proposal and the faceless bureaucrats at the Local Government Commission can shepherd it through without the local community ever having a vote, and that is shameful. This is the cynical, jaded and duplicitous ratbag behaviour that we've come to expect from the National Party. Mr. Speaker, we also oppose this bill because of the way that it's been done. It is based on a lie, and in fact it's based on 3 lies. The first is that councils are out of control, they're doing all sorts of non-core activities as a result of the 2002 Local Government Act. Never mind the Minister's own officials in the regulatory impact statement saying there is no clear quantitative evidence to suggest that the Local Government Act 2002 has resulted in a proliferation of new activities or that local government is undertaking a wider group of functions. And Dr. Smith, you might like to listen, finally, in the 3rd reading of this bill, you might like to listen to, I said Dr. Smith, he might like to listen to this evidence from the Minister of Local Government's own officials. There is no evidence that because of the Local Government 2002 Act that local councils have proliferated their activities. The second lie from Dr. Smith is that all this so-called non-core activity has resulted in an explosion of debt. And sir, this is perhaps the most galling and outrageous thing that this national government's done in recent times. This national government is the biggest borrower in New Zealand history ever. And after Labor ran 9 surpluses in a row, and reduced government debt from 40% to 18% of GDP, and net debt fell to 0 under the Labor government, this national government in the last 4 years has increased government debt by more than $50 billion. And he has the gall to criticise the entire local government sector for increasing debt to $8 billion. Well, this national government should take a look at itself in the mirror. But no, Nick Smith has peddled the line that council spending and council debt is out of control. He has shamelessly used a handful of egregious examples as if the financial mismanagement of Kaipara District Council is a justification for reforming the entire local government sector. The third lie is that this bill will keep rates down. There is nothing in this bill that will make a blind bit of difference to the rates bills that New Zealanders pay. Dr Smith and his National Party colleagues should be utterly ashamed of themselves.
I call the honourable member Eugenie Sage. Tēnā koe, Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr.